Hey there, this is Cosmo. I'm going to show you how to create some things in Tinkercad. Now we're going to do some 3D modeling here, and this is totally for beginners. We're going to assume you've never created anything in any kind of 3D modeling software before. We're looking at the Tinkercad website here. If you don't have an account already, and you're a total beginner, you probably don't, then you would click sign up and go through that process. I have an account, I'm going to sign in. By the way, I'm going to move through the different things you can do here and allow you to pause the video whenever you need to try things out. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time sitting here and waiting for things to load and all that stuff. We want to make this an efficient little video. So I'm going to click sign in here, and so I usually sign in through Facebook and etc. etc. Either way, you want to sign into your account. Once you do, if you have any designs, they'll all be here. I'm going to create a new one from scratch, so I just clicked on create new design. Once it opens up a new design, it's going to give it a very strange name. You can change the name by just clicking right here on what it's on the name. It says Smooth Elsing Densor. That means nothing to me, so I'm going to change that to Little House. Okay, and we're going to create a little object here, and so we're calling it Little House. I hit enter and we're good. First, before we do anything, real quick, I'm going to show you how to move around on the work plane here, or in your work environment. It opens up usually with all these different objects over here showing and some different things. We won't worry about all these details right now. For now, we're just going to see how to create a simple object. I want to tell you how to use your mouse and everything and how to get around or navigate within this environment. It's real simple. You may have noticed that I moved the surface around like this. What I'm actually doing is I'm physically moving around this work plane. We're going to put some of these objects out here and mess with them. Before I do that, I want to show you how to use your mouse here. Again, I was saying that you notice I'm moving around here. I'm moving up and down in front of this work plane. The way I'm doing that is I'm using a 3-button mouse. You're really going to want to have a 3-button mouse. That's a left button, a right button, and a middle scroll wheel. The scroll wheel will allow you to, if I roll it forwards, it'll allow me to zoom in. If I roll it backwards, it'll allow me to zoom out. If I push down on it and treat it like a button, it'll allow me to move left and right and up and down. Okay, that's what the scroll wheel is used for. If I use let's go to the right click button first. The right click button, if I click on that and hold it down and move my mouse, now I can move around like this. I'm moving in basically in like circles, but I'm also moving up and down, right and left, and I can go all the way around the surface of this, or the perimeter of this, right? Now that's different than the mouse, the center button, or the scroll wheel. The scroll wheel won't allow me to go in circles, and it'll only allow me to go left, right, or up and down. Okay. Now the left button is used to move objects around. So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to select an object. Let's use this box right here. When I select an object, I click with my left button and pull it out, and it's going to create an actual object that I can mess with and alter and change and all these things. Whenever you have an object selected, this little panel pops up, the shape panel. It shows you what color it is, and it shows you the radius. You can change all the dimensions of it here. We're not going to do that right now. We're going to do it on the screen. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about these just yet. Alright, so I'm going to click away from it and it'll deselect it. You know your object is selected because all these handles, what we call handles, appear around it to allow you to see the dimensions. Now I'm going to zoom in using my scroll wheel, and I'm going to show you how to change the dimensions of this box. By default, most objects you drop out here are around 20 millimeters wide, and in this case it's 20 millimeters wide and deep. Okay. Another thing you should know is this snap grid down here and this number right here, 1.0 millimeters. It will snap to 1 millimeter at a time if you try to move this box. Now remember how to move things. You use your left mouse button. You click, right? You select it. Now you click and hold and you can move it. It's moving in exactly 1 millimeter increments around the surface of the environment here, okay? But let's resize the box. I'm going to make this box, instead of 20 by 20, I'm going to make it 25 by 25. Let's say 25 by 30 to give it some different numbers. There's two ways I can do it. I can click on this little handle, which only allows me to go left and right. I can drag left and right by clicking on my left mouse key and dragging that handle back and forth. In other words, holding it down while I move the mouse. Or I can click on the front and back ones, either one, and it'll show you exactly how deep you're going with this. So again, I want to make it 25 by 30, let's say. So first of all, we'll make it 25 deep. I click on that. I can drag to 25. It's pretty easy to do because we're moving in exactly 1 millimeter increments. Remember this over here. Or you can click it, and once that little box shows up, you can click that and type in 25, and it'll make it 25. It already was, so it didn't change it. Now let's make it 30 wide. I click here, and notice I've been messing with it, so it's 23 wide. I can click there and drag and move, or I can click in the box and make this 30, and it'll automatically resize it. Perfect. Let's say I want to make this 25 high as well. I can click on that little box and change that to 25. If I change my mind and I want it to be something different, I can change that number, or again, I can drag it up and down. Let's say I make it a size I decided I don't want to do, and I let go. Now it's 11 high. If I want to, I can click on undo, and it'll go back to what it was the last time. You can click undo bunches of times. It'll take you all the way back. In fact, if I click undo enough times, it'll go all the way back to when I didn't even have a box. Watch. Bam, bam, bam. Now there's no box. Oh, I want the box back, so let's redo. In fact, we'll redo all the way to the end. See, you can go back and forth with your undo and redo. I'm going to stop here. We're at 11. I want it to be 25 high, so I click 20, or I type 25 in, I hit enter, and it changes it. All right, here we go. Now I'm going to show you how to make a custom item, a custom object. You can get really creative with this by taking blocks and melding them together and mushing them together and sizing them and doing all these things. To give you an example, I'm just going to create something real simple. Let's create like a little house, okay? We know that our block is 30 millimeters wide, so we want our rooftop, this is going to be the rooftop of our little house, we want it to be a little bit wider, so let's make it 40. See how that looks. Bang, 40, okay? We also know that the block is, let's call this the building. The building is 25 deep. We want our roof to overhang some. We're going to make it 30 deep, just to make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to type in 30. Sorry if I may have messed something up there. Let me do it again. 30 and hit enter. Now it's 30 deep. Now obviously they need to be centered. You can sit here all day long and try to figure out where you want that, but that's the hard way. So we're going to center these two objects together. Wait, before we do, this is the roof. It needs to be higher, right? So watch this. Anytime you bring an object out from the panel over here, it will automatically place it on the floor of your surface here, or of your work environment. That's really important, because if I was to take this pyramid that I created just now and want to print it out on a 3D printer, and I export it to my 3D printer, it's going to print starting wherever this is. I can move it off the floor by lifting it up by grabbing, let me go back a little, by grabbing the handle that looks like a dome, or I'm sorry, a cone on top, or a triangle. That handle will move. It won't resize anything. It'll move it up and down vertically, right? So it's now off of the floor, off of the surface of the floor. I'm going to go back. Sometimes you want it to be off the surface, but if I was just printing this object right here, and I lifted it up, let's say, to 10 millimeters, see the 10 right there? When I go to 3D print that object, it's going to start trying to lay plastic down 10 millimeters above the print bed. So this does not work. Your object should always be on the floor or at 0 right here in order to print. Okay, just remember that. So right now everything's on the floor. I'm going to get rid of this. We don't need it. And let's go back to these two things. We want our roof not to be on the floor because we want it to look like a little house. So if I want to be real accurate, first I look at how tall my building is, and it's 25. So I can bring this up to 25 above the floor. 25 millimeters above the floor. I can move it this way by manually, or I can type in 25 as I said. And now it's exactly 25 off the floor, which means it's exactly the same distance from the floor that the block is, or that the building is high. Does that make sense? All right, now I'm going to also want to center these things. What I was saying before is you can move this around all day long to try and get it accurately centered, or you can align it. That's the way you're going to want to do it. So in order to align two objects, or any amount of objects, to align them, you're going to want to select them both. You can do this two ways. You can select on one, you can click on one and select it. That's a left click. You can hold your shift key down and click on the second object, and now you've selected two. Now watch, as I move them around, they move together because I've selected them both. If I don't want either one, I can click away and deselect them, or let me select them both again. I can now click on one holding the shift key and it'll go backwards. It'll deselect it. So now all I have is my roof. Also, you can tell what you've got selected here by looking over here. See the green color? If you're not sure, you can look over here and see that it's red and green, etc. The colors, by the way, are only used for reference. When you export an object in a certain color, it will have nothing to do with what color it prints on your 3D printer, so don't worry about that. It's really just used to help you identify different objects. So let's align this so that it looks a little more like a little simple house. I select them both by doing what I said, or you can click anywhere on an empty space and move your mouse around. It'll create a square, a red square, right? As you do this, whatever that red square touches becomes selected. So I can touch them just barely, and now I've selected them both. You also want to be careful that you don't have an object off in the distance, and as you're trying to select this little, the box and the roof, you accidentally select something else. You got to be careful about that. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of that. Go back to this. We've selected them both. Here's how to align them. Very simple. Up here is an align function or a line icon. You click on that and new handles are going to appear around these objects. These are alignment handles. Let's say I wanted to align the roof and the building to the left. I would click on the left alignment and everything would align left or right. It's perfectly aligned if that handle is grayed out and you can't use it. That means it's already there. So I don't want it left or right. And I also can align it on the top or the bottom. Watch that. Watch this. See? Now it's aligned that. That messes me all up. So I'm going to undo to go back to where I was. I have to reselect them and select the align function. I can also align them on the bottom. And it gives you a preview. Notice that there's sort of a invisible looking roof down at the bottom. It's going to show you what's going to happen. I don't want to align any way other than this way, left and right, and also front and back. So I'm going to go over here to this handle and select that. Let me spin around so you can see what happens. I'll select this one, bang, right? Now we are aligned, we're centered this way and this way. You can tell by looking at those little gray handles. There's other things you can do here. We won't get too far into those right now. That's what you may notice. There's other handles that are popping up as I move around. Let's not get things too confused here. Let's just stick with the basics. That is completely aligned. I'm moving around using my right key so I can look at it from all different directions. My right mouse button, my right key. Alright, so I'm clicking on my right mouse button, holding it down and moving to look at it. Before I move on, I want to show you that if you want to move this house around, you can select both items by clicking on one, holding down shift, clicking on the other, moving it around, or you can decide, hey, I know this is a permanent object now, I don't want to mess with it anymore. You can select them both and go up here to group. If I click group, those two items become one item. They will change to a similar color, to the same color. If you don't want them to change to another color just for your reference sake, you can go down here and click on multicolor, and it will leave them in their original colors, which would be green and red in this case, right? If you don't care, then you can just leave that alone and let it recolor it. Or if you don't want it to be red, you can recolor it that way by clicking on any of these colors here. Colors don't really matter in your finished product, except they're really mostly used for reference, right? I want to remember that this was a certain object and that was a certain object or whatever. Right now we don't care, but later when you're creating more complex objects, you'll realize that sometimes that coloring helps. Right, let's get back to our custom shape. I want to do one more thing to this object. You see these two objects over here that are sort of look transparent, they're kind of gray. These are called holes. You can create a hole from any shape, anything you want. Doesn't matter what it is. Let's say I want to create a hole from the shape of a pyramid. I can pull out an object and change it from a solid to a hole. Now it's a hole. I'll explain to you how we use holes. I'm going to delete this, and we're going to use a cylinder hole. These are already holes just for convenience. There are two ways to make a cylinder hole. You can either drag a cylinder hole over, or you can drag a solid cylinder over, and you can change it into a hole. So it doesn't really matter. Alright, we're just going to use this cylinder right here. Now let's say I want a circle or a hole cut out of this house, right? First off, I need to orient the hole so that it goes the direction I want it to. So I'm going to make sort of like a tunnel in this house. If you go to any object Another handle that appears is a rotate handle. See that right there? There's one here. This sort of clock looking thing shows you exactly how far you're rotating it. I want to rotate it this way. Watch. I'm going to click on that little arrow there. That's the handle. And it's sometimes hard to get exactly, but once I click on it, left click and move. If I move within this circle, it'll go in exact increments of 22.5 degrees, which is really handy because you can move it exactly 90 degrees like that. It'll snap to 22.5 degrees as you move. If I go outside of this circle way out here, it'll do it 1 degree at a time. If you want to be really accurate, then you would come out here, okay? But I want to be 90 degrees, and so I go there and I let go of my mouse button, and now it's been moved to 90 degrees. I also want this house to be, this hole to be long enough to cut a hole into this house, the entire depth of the house. So remember, the house is, if you forgot, you can look over here. By hovering over the handle, I can see it's 30 millimeters long. So I'm going to create this, I'm going to make this at least 30 millimeters long. We'll just go 30 something, doesn't really matter, 35 millimeters. It's 35 millimeters long. Now that hole's awfully big. I want, let's say, a smaller hole cut out of this house. So I'm going to click on these handles, and I want the hole to be, let's say 15 millimeters wide. I click on that and hit enter. Now I'm going to click on the height part right here, and I'm going to make that 15 millimeters. Bang. And it goes down. Notice it stays on the surface or on the floor at all times until you move it up and down. So we want to take this and we want to cut it out of this house, right? To make like a tunnel in this house. If we don't want the tunnel to be, the hole to be at the bottom, we can center it. Now if I center this with a grouped object, remember this house is one object now. If I center this with the group object using the align key or the align function, I can center it this direction, like that, right? And then I can center it up and down by clicking this, and it'll put it exactly in the middle of the entire object. I also want it centered this way, let's say. Boom, right? It's exactly in the middle of the entire object, but I don't want it centered that way. I want it centered on the building part. What I have to do is I have to select the entire object that is grouped and ungroup it. So this is why you use ungroup a lot. Over here is the ungroup icon. I click that. And now these are separate objects. There's the roof, there's the building. I accidentally moved it. Oh, I apologize. I just used undo to put it back. I want to center this circle, this hole, with this box. So I select both of them. I click the align, and now I click this, and it moves the hole down. Now here's what I really want to do, though. We know that it's centered in all different directions right now, and we can double check by looking. See how that's grayed out there, it's grayed out there, and it's even grayed out here. So it's grayed out, that means it's centered in all different directions. I'm going to unselect everything by clicking in the empty space, and I'm going to move this hole down to where it's actually halfway, or about halfway through, so I can create sort of a tunnel. Let's say I wanted that tunnel to be higher. I can change the shape of this circle to make it higher. I'm just goofing around right now, and I want it to be a little bit lower this way. I want to move it down some. It doesn't really matter. I'm just trying to show you how to do it. So I'm going to cut a circle this shape out of this, right? In order to do that, all you have to do is select the two objects, whatever two objects you want. Once those are selected, it's going to combine them. It's going to treat this as a whole. And watch, here we go. I'm going to select both of them by... I'm going to select both of them first, and then I'm going to group them. It turns it into one object, and it cuts the hole out. The cool thing about this is you can cut any shape you want. I'm going to show you something really cool here. I'm going to take everything I've got, create one group out of them, or one object, by grouping them together. Now I'm going to take another shape, a big block. I'm going to make this block much bigger really quick, and we're going to finish up here. I just want to show you that you can create the hole you want to be any shape you want. So I'm going to go like this, and just make sure it's nice and big. I'm going to take that little house that I created, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to hold the Alt key down first, then I'm going to left click on the object and move it. It automatically makes a duplicate of it, okay? Let me go back and do it again. So we click here. If I hold Alt and I then left click, I can duplicate that object. There it is. Now the only reason it looks bigger is because I moved it forward, but I duplicated it. Okay? So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to show you why I'm duplicating it. You ready? I'm going to hold Alt down, duplicate it, and move it over here. It's a little bit bigger than I want it to be, so I'm going to make it shorter. Let's leave it the way it is and just make the block bigger. Now notice that I've got a house that's kind of stuck in the middle of that. I'm going to center the two of them by selecting them both, by dragging around them. I'll click the Align function up here. I'll center them both. Now watch this, this is cool. I'll take my shape, which is a house. I turn it into, ready, a hole. Now I've got a hole the shape of my house. I select the hole. I hold down Shift, select the block. I combine them, or I'm sorry, group them. I'm used to saying combine, but I'm going to group them. And it creates a hole the shape of a house, which is kind of weird, right? Okay, so I basically just wanted to show you that any object can be made into a hole to cut out of another object. You can use text. There's actually text down here. And once you learn how the basics work on Tinkercad, you will learn how, I'll show you later how to bring in custom text, custom logos, different shapes, anything you want, and create an object out of them or even a hole. So there you have how to make a little shape. Now if you want to take that shape and 3D print it, you would go to Export. First you would select your shape. You would go to Export. You would go over here and click on STL file. You're going to save it as an STL. You're going to make sure that the selected shape is checked off, because you most of the time don't want to use everything in the design. I'll tell you why. As you're creating things, you may end up with extra pieces and parts laying all over the place like this. If you're like me, you end up kind of making a mess in your work surface. Once you're done creating your little house, that's all you want to 3D print. The rest of this is for other things as you're experimenting, etc. So you would click Export, and you would export the selected shape. If that's not highlighted, it's because you have nothing selected, and it's going to automatically do everything in the design. So be real careful that you are aware of what you're exporting. So I select the house, I export, I click STL, I give it a name, we'll call it Little House, I save it, and it saves it to my hard drive. And now I can take that and give it to a 3D printer to print, or give it to somebody who 3D prints, or I can open it up in my 3D printer and print it. Anyway, that comes later. If you don't know how that works, don't worry about it. I'm going to get rid of all these extra objects. The cool thing about Tinkercad is if I close this whole browser right now, it's saved automatically. There is no save function here anywhere, right? You just go out of it. So I can go back to the front page of Tinkercad where it just shows all my projects. There they are. They're going to pop up in a second. I can open any of these projects that I've been working on. There's another test project I actually started to do, and I can just click on Tinker This. I can look at them this way by hovering over them. These are different things that I've created. In a minute, I'm going to create another video for you on how to create an actual object. I'm going to show you what it looks like 3D printed, and I'm going to show you how to create it from scratch, a real functioning object. So for now, that's how to use Tinkercad, the very basics. Hope that worked for you, and I hope you enjoyed it. See ya.